Hey everybody, welcome back to the weekly analysis for the week ending January 20th, 2023. And I'm excited for today's update. I'm talk a little bit about some of the highlights that have been happening in the markets over the last few days. And then I will go and do the same thing I did last week where I go through and I look for opportunities in the markets. And you'll notice the screen looks a little bit different from my normal updates. I've been working on a bunch of things and working on how to implement some of my analysis into the charts so that I don't have to reference a lot of different things, go back between chart windows or different indicators or things like that. So you'll notice a whole bunch of things that you didn't see last week, and you'll notice the box to the right side of the screen is missing, just leaving that table off to the side. And what I wanted to start off with, just to remind you to hit the like button and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. J. Thomason. And you can also subscribe to my Substack, befinanciallyfree.substack.com. The links are in the description below. You'll notice that I have portfolio updates if you are a premium subscriber. And then I also have a premium monthly newsletter where I share a lot of my deeper thinking, a lot of data analysis, trade ideas, portfolio construction, stuff like that. And then I have the free weekly digest. That's what I post every week for free. So if you want to see those every week, where you get to see some of these charts that I share and some of my analysis, just a small bit of my analysis, then you can get that for free every week. So just want to encourage you to look at that. So the big story this week is crypto and Bitcoin specifically has just been taking off. I mean, all the markets up today, a lot of green across the board. And Bitcoin and crypto definitely getting a lot of love. If you want to just look really quickly, if we go from just the start of the year, January 1st, until now, Bitcoin is up 36%. And if you go off of the wick low from November of last year, then Bitcoin's up 46% from that low. Bitcoin's really been moving. That's been a really big story. My indicators have suggested that that there was some exhaustion here. So obviously, one of the things that I did was you have to be wise when you take positions, and this is just something that I'm still that I'm kind of working on, trying to grow more and more. The indicators that I use suggested that this was a spot where there was some exhaustion and overbought behavior, price behavior. And obviously Bitcoin can stay, specifically Bitcoin and crypto can stay overbought and in exhaustion in those indicators for a really long time. And so obviously what you do, the reason why I was talking about you need to be wise with your placement, with your orders and things like that, is you obviously don't take that signal and then go all into the downside. And so what you do is if you're interested in taking a stab at the downside, then you obviously you take a percentage of your equity and you put it towards that position, and then you have to manage your risk around strict levels. So right now I'm on a logged scale chart because what I wanted to show specifically is that Bitcoin has had enough price movement over the last few weeks, and specifically today, that it was able to break through its trend line resistance on the log scale. So normally on the linear, we broke that a long time ago, but obviously we did end up making a lower low. So I mean, the rules of TA would suggest you have to extend that trend line out. So even if you did that and you bought on the linear scale at that breakout and then the retest right at about that level, I mean, you got the right spot, but the confirmation. Let me go back. There we go. Sorry about that. But the confirmation is on the log scale chart, and so obviously this is a really big deal, and so a lot of people are definitely jumping into the trade. So one of the big questions that I'm asking today is, or that I'm talking about today is, do you chase here? And I've done some analysis looking at previous crypto cycles, and I think the one caveat in what I'm about to say that you have to remember is that We are still in the midst of a lot of macro uncertainty. So we have obviously the Fed looking to hike only 25 basis points at the February 1st rate announcement. So we're talking about kind of coming to the end of the hiking cycle potentially. Obviously, they could hike 25s for the next couple of meetings all the way up until they get to their over 5% rate if they were to continue to do that. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's a lot of uncertainty about the idea of the soft landing. Economic numbers are showing that that's possible, but we still don't know. We still have to wait for some data to come in before we can make some of those, before we can confirm some of those things. But with that uncertainty in mind, I did go back and I looked. There's some various indicators that you can look at. The long story short is that what if you look at what Bitcoin has done in breaking the log trend line, in breaking various longer term moving averages. So like for example, if you let me just do this really quick. If you take a moving average, an EMA, and you put it on a weekly, and you put in a 26 week, which is a half a year, you can see that line comes in right. We broke above that earlier this week and have retested it and have resumed off. That's a clean breakout, retest, and resumption from that level. And so I looked back. I just used that as a proxy as kind of my first analysis. And upon analysis, when you're in a bear market, so you see how here we're in a bear market. We did break above. And I just use this as a case study. This is, I think, a really good way to think about this here. If you look here, we did break above that 26-week moving average. But then when we came in on a retest, we didn't get that resumption up to a higher high. And so this is technically a failed breakout here. So what you want to watch for is when you get these breakouts in the bear market, you want to see if after you've come down to retest the 26-week moving average, you want to see if it can make a higher high. And so I'll just go back to the most recent one as an example. If you go back to the 2018 bear market and then going into 2019, what you actually see there is, like you don't even get like a true retest. You get a retest of kind of a horizontal level. But what you see is that once you're in the bear market and price breaks that, and then has some kind of retest and then makes a higher high, it's pretty much off to the races. And so obviously in 2019, price, if you go from the break of that, let me turn this off really quick. If you go from the break of that trend line to the 2019 interim peak, that was a 205% move. And so obviously that's a big deal. And then, I don't know, let's just go back to the 2014, 2015 bear market. And then let's find that spot. So here you can kind of see a similar situation. You get the breakout, you get price that comes off a little bit, and then you get the resumption back up. And that ended up being the confirmation to buy in. And what was crazy in this is that that never crossed back down and went straight to peak. And obviously that peak was really, really big. That was just one peak, I guess. So just want to point that out. So this is actually a really big deal. And so if you're looking at where is the place where it's going to be safe to buy, I mean, without knowing for sure, how the future is going to unfold with rate decisions and things like that, are we going to have conditions for a crash, which a lot of people are talking about, what's going to happen when the actual recession comes. We don't really know, but my point is that that's a really big signal that you can't ignore. So I did want to point that out, as well as pointing out if you go from the perspective of the MRT, which is my crypto tracking indicator that I made a while back. You might recall if you've been following me either on Twitter or on these videos that for some time I've talked about how price historically has pretty much, except for on one occasion, always broken down below the orange line. And then when it doesn't, which is I believe in 2011, it didn't break down below after its peak. It did kind of something like this where it came really, really close but didn't exactly touch. Then the confirmation of price having made the bottom is a break above the green, and we did get that break above the green on the 12th of January. And then obviously historically, once you're above the white line, like you're pretty much on. So you can go back on this indicator and see that. Obviously, if you have a black swan event, then you have price coming. You can have price flash crash down. But point being, on crypto, that looks like, I mean, that looks like that's it. You know, it looks like the low is in. I actually on Twitter said I think the low is in now because I got this confirmation right here. So right now it's about finding a good place to buy. And again, just because you know, prices above this level doesn't mean it can't come back down. But my point is that it looks like the low is in based on this indicator. Price could still come back down below 20,000. I don't know. It's almost like the way I'm thinking about it right now is it's almost the safest thing to do is just to buy. If you're into crypto, obviously you can just buy and then ride the thing up to the next peak. If you're a long-term holder, it doesn't really matter anyway. So I do want to call that out as well. So that's obviously the big story of the week. But again, all the markets are up today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them, start looking for some opportunities. And so to start off with on SPY, so I just want to go through and look at a couple opportunities. What you'll notice is what you want to see is this line that's kind of waving across the screen. What you like to see is this line to transition from green to yellow or from red to yellow. And in some cases, it'll transition from either green or red straight to the other one. So like in this case, you see a straight transition here from red to green. And in that case, you have to be careful because sometimes that transition can mean a really big rally or crash is imminent, but also it has on occasion produced false signals. You actually get right here this transition here. Both indicators transition from red to green. The bars change from red to green as well. And price bounced. That was back in March. So you know that was a 10% bounce back in March. So, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be a new bull market. It just means the bias is to the upside. So what you want to see is both of those indicators showing transition. So one way to look at that is here. You have and in this one the waving line is a longer term trend indicator, and so you want to see this. This is obviously the dominant one. So if this is red, then whenever the bars turn yellow or green, then those are typically counter trend bounces. And then obviously when the line is green, then when you see yellow or red transitions, it can often be just retraces with bullish price action. And so what you want to see is a transition point. So like I can show you, just to give you an example here on SPY, in our bear market that we've been in here. So you have price come down, and then it transitions to yellow line and yellow bar at the same moment. And I want to show you here also, I have these, the bars will have either green or red arrows underneath them, or triangles pointing up or down. And those are oversold indicators. That's what I refer to as my ripple oscillator. And so that kind of shows you very near-term overbought, oversold conditions. And then at the bottom end of the screen and the top end of the screen, you may see green, red, or yellow arrows. And the green or red arrows typically will point out very strong signals. These are my wave strength signals. And what you like to see is those signals line up. And so what you have here is here back in June, you had a transition from red to yellow basically at the same time, along with an oversold signal. And then you actually, on the ripple oscillator, and then the wave strength actually sent you a exhaustion signal to the downside. So this would have been a really, really solid opportunity to buy. And if you took that signal, you know, even if you go from the top of that bar, then where you would be signaled to get out, you're still making 8%. You know, so these are safe signals. They just kind of show you conditions both in the short to medium and also the long term. So I do want to call that out. So anyway, with that in mind, let's take a look at the opportunities here. So we're right now in green, double green. So that means we should expect bullish price action. We had an overbought signal on the Ripple oscillator a couple days ago, but we did not get one on today's price action. And so you just want to be aware of that. And by the way, I'm sorry, these signals on the Ripple oscillator, these little triangles next to the price bar, they are signaling to you when the Ripple oscillator is leaving the overbought or oversold zone. And that's actually a better signal than just watching for when overbought or oversold happens. And so obviously price can leave and come back and leave and come back. And so just want to point that out. So SPY is showing bullish. The Qs, the NASDAQ also showing bullish, although I would call out here, you can see the Ripple oscillator is showing you an overbought signal here. And so I would be watching here to see going into next week. Now today we had a big OPEX expiry, especially on the NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ performed by almost a whole percent stronger, better than the other indices, so I do want to call that out. But because you're getting that signal here, you want to watch and see if these signals continue. So on the NASDAQ, this is not a place that you want to buy on the green bar, even though you are showing bullish trend on both on the short term and the medium term indicators, because in all likelihood you're not going to get very far. You're not going to get a good position to buy off of. So you just want to be aware of that. And then the IWM, which is the Russell 2000 ETF, it's a little concerning here because we got, obviously we had the transition to green on the longer term line indicator. We came up and then we had an oversold, sold down, and then we're still for 3 days in a row, that Ripple oscillator is showing oversold. And we didn't get a transition back to a green bar here on IWM on the Russell. So I do want to call that out as well. That's a little concerning. That shows you that even though we had a strong up day, that this is actually losing its momentum, and it's losing momentum at the wrong time in an oversold state. So I'm going to, I have that flagged. I'm going to watch that. I'm going to unflag these because I do want to watch that. Actually, I'm going to flag the Qs. It's just that the Russell, again, looks a little bit better, or if you're thinking about potential downside that might come, then the Russell is giving you a much better signal than the Qs are. Let me go to SPY growth. So here we're in yellow, and so what I want to point out here was that when you got this yellow candle with the overbought signal, this is the type of place where typically the signal is good to take a downside trade when you've got a double yellow after a transition. Well, actually, so you have just yellow here after red. So maybe this is actually technically a conflicting signal. So excuse me on that, I apologize. But still, enough is in your favor here that this could have been a good signal. And time will tell if you bought on this. Time will tell if that will end up being a good signal. And then SPY value. This is another one that was green on the long term, transition to yellow. So this is kind of the thing I was talking about. So it was green on the bars and green on the line, and then you get a yellow and a red transition with a yellow transition on the line. So that's the opportunity, and actually you can see entry here. So I guess I'm giving away that I have an entry on this one to the downside. And again, it's just speculative. You risk manage, and you make sure that you don't have too much of a percentage allocation to it. You manage your levels accordingly. So anyway, growth and value. So it actually looks like value is underperforming in this particular period of time. So I do want to call that out. If we go to the sector ETFs, then what you see here is, and I'm going to just do this here. You see here that the XLC, the communications sector, transitioned back to green. So if you didn't buy on these on this spot right here, then obviously you don't want to chase this. XLV, let's see, no real signal here. Actually, here we've got an exhaustion signal to the downside. So if this red line right here transitions to yellow going into next week, then XLV is actually going to be a really good buy. So I do want to flag that green to the upside. XLB, building materials, yellow transition back from red. However, we have been getting some overbought signals, so I'm going to unflag that one. Technology, kind of the same as the NASDAQ. We got this overbought signal, but we are in green, so I'm just going to ignore that one. XLF financials was red on the bars, just transitioned to yellow. So I want to watch because these signals right here, I want to see if these overbought signals stay, or if we were able to shake out a lot of that overbought nature on these drops in the last few days before today. But anyway, no signal there yet. Or actually, yeah, let's just flag that green. XLE energy, still bullish. We did have a couple of yellow days, but it is showing overbought. So you would expect to see kind of some a pullback going into next week. And then here, XLRE real estate. So we transitioned from green to yellow on the bars. The line has not shifted, so we'll see what happens. But a couple of overbought signals in a row, so that's a potential. It has potential for being a downside signal soon, so I'm going to keep that flagged red. And then XLY, consumer discretionary, kind of in the same boat, some overbought signals after a transition from green to yellow on the bars, so I do want to watch that. XLU, you can kind of see here it went straight from green to red. And we did also have overbought signals to the downside, but those were exhaustion signals to the upside. But the reason they're yellow here is because they weren't necessarily great signals, but they were signals nonetheless. And obviously that's built into the Pine script to kind of distinguish the difference between a yellow signal and a red signal. Because the red signals here were telling you, hey, this is not a good spot, you need to get out. So just want to call that out. Just like the green signals down here were the best buying opportunities. So XLU, not going to chase it, so I'm just going to not worry about that. XLI, industrials, on this screen on today where we had a really, really big up day, it stayed red on the bar. So to me, that's concerning. So I'm going to watch that to the downside. XLP consumer staples, and kind of similar. We had this one was actually a laggard. If you look to the top left of the screen, it only says that we were up 7.78% when the rest of the market was up pretty big. So it's interesting. Consumer staples, utilities, the types of things that perform well in recessions when there is no growth, those things have been underperforming. So that kind of tells you that the market is excited about Goldilocks, which is where growth is up, and then obviously with inflation coming down, the market thinks that that's going to persist. So that's kind of the trade that's happening right now. So I do want to call that out. But this one has already gotten away to the downside. I'm not going to watch that. And then home builders just transitioned from red to yellow on the bars, but it's green in the long term, so I'm just going to ignore that. And then let me just run through some commodities really quick and just see if there's anything that stands out. Wow, GLD. Gold is very, very, very severely overbought. But, with the China reopening, I think that, I put this in my newsletter to my premium subscribers, GLD still has some room, to be honest with you, because the backdrop of China reopening is really good for metals in general and gold specifically. So we'll leave that there. It is interesting to see silver moving sideways because typically in a precious metals bull market, silver should outperform. So that's another thing I want to just call out. Silver's indicator, the long-term line indicator, is yellow, and so I'm going to be watching to see if we can get a yellow transition, because you can also see we've gotten some exhaustion signals on the upside, so we'll watch that. Let me flag this because this would be a downside. Let's see, nothing there on GDX. Uranium, nothing there. XME, nothing there. USO, nothing there. XOP, nothing, no signal. Signal on oil services, so we've got some overbought readings this week along with transitions from green to yellow. So these are potentially an opportunity. I had this flagged previously, so I'm going to leave that flagged. Let's see, let's go agriculture. Agriculture is showing some oversold signals, some transition in the candles from red to yellow, so we'll have to watch and see if we can get a transition to yellow on the longer term indicator. And then BITO showing the oversold, the overbought signal on the Ripple oscillator, but very green. So again, this is a really good way to kind of show you what was going on here. So you got the transition from red to yellow, and the candles were already yellow. So so you just want to, I mean, that's just the opportunity to buy right there. So anyway, I'm still on log scale. Whoops. Anyway, those are some of the opportunities. So this video went a little bit longer than I intended, so I apologize for that. But I hope it was positive for you and showed you some opportunities. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share if you thought this was interesting. Good luck. Remember, Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But again, be careful, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next time.